l'idea era quella di avere un divano, un po' tipo il fireside tasting modello, no, come dire, presidenziale, perché
Kind
l'idea non è
of
tanto
presidential
quella di
wine tasting,
assaggiare
because
i
the
vini,
idea
fare
is not much
insieme,
to
oltre a
taste
portare una
wines,
denominazione
and we'll do
sulle
that
categorie
together and
generalmente
dwell on
similari,
the
ma
denomination
invece
in
guardare
detail,
tutto
as it
questo
often happens in
continuamente
during
con
master classes,
filtro,
but
con
to
tecniche proprio da
look
famiglia Dal
at all
Bianco.
this
Questi sono
through the Dal
marchi come
Bianco's
Masottina, per
family's
esempio, grande deposito
filter.
della
There
famiglia,
are some brands
è una
such
famiglia
as
che diciamo ha messo
Masottina
tutta
that
questa
are so
storia.
important that led us to
Andremo avanti
decide
con un po'
to
di
tell this
domande.
story.
Io farò
We'll
scherzare, poi dopo
have a
interverrò.
sort
Chi lo
of
vedrete?
question and
Il
answer
nostro interlocutore
session. We
questa
have
sarà l'inizio, diciamo di alcuni
series of
elementi
first
della storia, del
questions
contributo,
that
ecco, del
concern
contributo
the
familiare
Famiglia Dal
nella storia
Bianco's
della denominazione del
history and
Prosecco, per
also the
esempio.
history
Non tutti,
of
quella
the
serie non
Prosecco
tutti sanno che quando
denomination,
io, che
because
vivo lo
not
sport di tempo,
everybody
quando partecipo alle
knows,
Olimpiadi
and I've
prima,
known them for
chiaramente
quite a
parlo di
while,
queste storie
this
interessantissime che
history.
facciamo
So,
e a
given that
fianco
these
vi
histories are
racconto
very
avremo un
interesting,
blocco.
we'll
Blocco numero
be
2 invece andremo a
covering
trovare
these.
un'altra
Then the
parte, diciamo,
second series
del vino
of
mediterraneo,
question
il
and answers will be
prosecco
covering the wine.
DOC, poi
First,
andremo
the
subito a affrontare
CDO
le loro rive
Prosecco,
mediterranee,
then
ma no
the
20-24
Dogliano Rive.
dei vigneti
You
e
own
infine
20%
faremo
of
due
vineyards
passaggi
there,
all'infinito
and
durante il
then
weekend italiano che erano
one
con i
last
vini
session with the
vitigni.
Colli
Allora,
Conegliano's
faccio un
wines.
piccolo
Where do we start from?
riassunto di
I'll
una
be
storia
summarizing
che questo non è proprio
this
termine parlantistico, perché il prosecco
family
è il vino
history. We do not normally speak about this
della
history
family
because
history, no?
Prosecco is
Dell'entertainment
the entertainment
ed è
industry
relativamente
wine,
anche questo
and
non
so
proprio
thanks
di
God
crescita intraprendente
we have
nella
this
denominazione,
wine.
ma al tempo
But at the
stesso
same
c'è una
time,
storia vecchia,
there
per cui
is an
fino da
old
sempre le mani
store
da
here
barba
because
erano assolutamente
wine
quelle
has been
grosse, quindi era
produced in this
potabile
area
addirittura,
for
però
centuries now.
alcune
The
note
Romans went
interessanti
there
che
and
riusciamo
started
ad applicare
producing wine, but some
nel
interesting
conoscere
notes.
questa
If
denominazione
we
così
speak
unica.
about
E
Plinius the
allora
Old,
questa è una
then we
storia
know
che vede
that
alcuni
from
primi movimenti
his
italiani nel
writings.
1200.
But
Cioè gli
anyway,
statuti
the
cittadini
first
Conegliano e
municipal
tutte
bylaws of
le parentesi
Conegliano
cittadine vicino parlano della
speak
presenza della
about
vite
the presence of the
come una
vineyard
presenza
as a
importante, già
significant
all'interno della comunità.
presence, which
Si
is already
leggono le
part of
leggi
the
che vanno
community
a tutelare il
life,
vino,
because there
si
are, for
promuovono le
instance,
battaglie
laws
riguardanti la vendemmia.
that
Non si può
are
circolare in
against
vignati
those
prima di
who
vendemmia,
steal
non so se sono
grapes
prevalenti
during the
lì,
harvest.
però
For
finché
instance, you
esiste la
cannot let
pubblicità
your
degli
dogs
abitanti di uno statuto
go
cittadino,
to the vineyard
esistono delle
during the
leggi
harvest. So it is very
dove
interesting
c'è
to understand
un'attenzione
that there were
incredibile
already
alla
laws
viticoltura.
at the
Quando
time,
arriva
talking about 1200.
quando arriva
When
la motocicletta passata, quando arriva per la prima volta la varietà prosecco,
the
cioè quando
Prosecco
esiste per la prima
cultivar
volta il documento
was
ufficiale è
found. The first official document
1754.
is
Questi anni qua sono
1754,
gli anni da qui alla
and
fine del
these years,
700,
until
sono
the
gli anni
end of
importanti per
the
questa denominazione,
1700s,
per
are
questi
very
raccolti.
important
Io sono
years
andato a
for
vedere gli
these
stralci
hillsides,
e
for
come
these
scoperte qua,
wine
perché
cultivars.
ero
And I took
incuriosito,
some notes because
soldi da pagare
I
per il
jotted
conto
down
uva,
again some notes.
per il fatto di
If
darle
you
100
steal
soldi,
grapes, you have
quelli
to pay
era ben
100
giustificato. Ma la cosa che più mi ha
pieces
interessato era ecco,
of money.
sono degli stralci
And
che ho tirato fuori
again, these are
dall'Accademia
notes that
di
I took
Conegliano,
from
graziati da Giacomo
Conegliano
Bianchi,
Academy,
proprio
Mr. Banchetti,
le
that
denominazione toscana
speaks
e quasi
of
tutte altre persone. Le facciamo
denomination.
così,
There
le
are
facciamo
five
dei
notes.
nomi in
The
relazione ai
fronts
tempi
of
del
the
sole del
hillsides
prosecco.
must be assessed
Diciamo,
first
le
whether
pendici,
they are in the
le
right
varie
side
qualità
for the
dei
sun.
terreni.
To the
Dobbiamo
laning
valutare bisogni
of the
attrattivi,
vineyard, you have
la
to assess the
declinazione delle
quality of the
facciate
soil
maggiore o
and
minore
also
ripidenza
the
e infine
slopes
guardare le ripidenze
were
perché di solito possono
important,
essere
and given
dilatate,
that
diciamo, delle
these
ripidenze anche
hills
molto
can be
ripide e
even
pendenti, le acque sommamente
high slopes, waters should also be analyzed, and also the fertilizers, the manure needed for that kind of hill. So talking about 1771, 1772. What happened then? Wine was produced, both white and red wine, sparkling wine, spumante wine was produced. Mid the 1800s, mid 19th century, Italy became, I can't think of the word, became a significant, important player in the sparkling wine field, and everything happened then. Black Pinot came from France, then the Italian method was discovered even before Martinotti in 1895 produced the tank method. The patent was then stolen by Monsieur Charmont. So the Conegliano school, together with the other enological schools in Italy, started being operational 1874. And let's move ahead with our history. 1969, when the Prosecco got the CDO. Then 1993, the first CDO for the Conegliano hillsides. But starting from then on, the Dal Bianco family, first in 1869, they got the CDO. But immediately after the war, when Epifanio Dal Bianco, your grandfather, the vineyard at the Montichiano, in between Conegliano and Venice. And allow me to complete my history. 1969, 1983, that was the year when the history of this territory was reborn. But then in 2009, Prosecco was produced, and the denomination moved from 150 million of bottles to 750 million bottles nowadays. When you visit Federico's wineries, you see wineries that are organized to produce both white and red wines, but they have become empty since 2009 because the Prosecco denomination in a way stole the window, so to say. Then what is the Dal Bianco's position? All this in 1946, they had just a few hectares. Now they have many more. But what is interesting is what comes now. Now I'll take a seat, and after this excursus from the dawn of times to today, very quick, extracts at the Museum of Cinema in Turin. There are thousands of years just climbing a stair. But anyway, I would start with the first wine. Please, can you tell us your story? So Epifanio started producing wine from the first 5 hectares. My name is Federico Dal Bianco. I am the 3rd generation of the Masottina denomination. Were established in 1946 by Epifanio Dal Bianco, my grandfather. He started cultivating the first 5 hectares in an area that gives nuances, deep nuances to the wines. Then 2nd generation, my father and my uncles started from the terroir of Conegliano. We're speaking about town that is located between the Alps and the Adriatic Sea. we are in between these two. Venice is 60 kilometers south and 70 kilometers north. We have the first range of all Alps, and this is very important for the terroir issue. So, second generations, we started in Conegliano. We started buying the first hectares at the end of the 80s, 1980s. Nowadays, we manage 300 hectares, 100 in Oljanos area, and also in the Treviso area where there is the CDO. We are a company, a farm, producing our wines from the vineyards to the finished bottle. We sell in more than 150 countries, 1.5 million bottles for Masottina and also Palazzi, half that amount of bottles. So let's now focus on what you did, your impact, the family impact for the denomination, not just for your own farm vineyard. Let's have a look at this first wine. This is an extra brew Prosecco. It is a single vineyard and it has a low content of sugar. To summarize, extra brut, a single vineyard, and the idea of lightening up the sugar residue in the wine. Can you expand on this? What was your contribution? Let's say that the project whereby my family started taking my grandfather's vineyards, and the vineyards was replanted in Gorgo Monticano to get this wine. We realized that as to this denomination, the CDO Prosecco coming from Treviso, the province where Treviso was born, we realized that with 600 million bottles, to find Prosecco DOC with a sugar content below the brut level, 6 grams per liters, was almost impossible. Very difficult. And starting from that vineyard, where the soil is rich in clay, and my grandfather produced both wine and red wines with this vineyard, with these grapes. My father decided to again cultivate Prosecco, but a different kind of Prosecco, given that my father started not from Gorgo Monticano, but from the heart of the Conegliano area. The concept of terroir was already inherent in his mind, was very clear in his mind already. So he tried to convey the concept of our Conegliano wines and transfer it to the CDO terroir. So we started speaking of the terroir of that specific vineyard. And that was related to my family's history, because that was the very first vineyard. That was the first area where my family started. This Via Venti is a single vineyard because this is the first extra brut within the denomination framework. I cannot say this. I cannot say this because there must have been some extra brut before us, but we conveyed the concept of terroir. We included the concept of terroir within the denomination. And we started from that vineyard that, thanks to its soil, gives us very fatty, very large wines. And by means of a very refined, sophisticated vinification, lowering the sugar content, we're talking about 2-3 grams. Even the alcohol content is very low, 11. There is the drop of Chardonnay, yes. please feel this freshness. Because we have the sambuco flowers on one side, lime, the apple. So we have terpenes, the bonzoid on one side. We have the fresh green, and then what is surprising about this Prosecco, which is a CDO, is the extra brut. Indeed, it is very difficult to find a Prosecco which is a CDO and that is also extra brut. I would like to remind everybody that extra brut is between 0.6 gram per liter, almost close to the dosage 0.3. To use brut on the label is something that you do for trading reasons. As to the specifications of the Conegliano, the zero dosage concerns those that are fermented in the bottle, so relying on the Italian methodology. So you can speak about extra brut and brut. But these are all experts, and this is a wine that, if tasted blindfolded, is focused on this acid citric tension, which is very vibrant. But this is not the only parameter, because if you have this citrinic flavor, then there is just a lemon. But the beautiful thing about using the glera is to have cultivar that is made up by mainly two biotypes, and they all have their individual clones. So when you visit Dal Bianco's vineyard, which is historical in its traditions, we have these clones that are generous, so with the balsamic notes, and others that are more generous with tea flavors, and then terpenes, tasting more like lemon. And then we now have another Prosecco that was marketed the first time in 2020. You were the first to bottle this wine, 10% black Pinot. And once again, the Dal Bianco family played a role in the story of the denomination, because when we studied this color, amongst the very many samples that we focused upon, your color shade was the one that was chosen. How did this happen? Let's share this with our colleagues. When the CDO consortium decided within its advisory board to go ahead with the new project that was then born in 2020 to have a rosé Prosecco, it asked some companies to carry out experiments both at a vinification level and sparkling level, to carry out tests to understand how the glera could be managed together with the black Pinot. So what were the percentages to be used for this black Pinot? And also to understand, given that the consortium wanted a very specific color shades, because market studies and analysis had been carried out, and it was discovered that a more appealing shade in the rosé universe was the Provenza one. And all these companies collaborated with the consortium, and they chose the cuvée produced by my father, then 5% black Pinot. This shade of rose was the one that had to be produced. So they set the standard. What is beautiful about our profession is not just to taste wine, but to learn stories from these wine producers. If I'm not wrong, they already served by the way, Via Venti is the main street of the Conigliano city, beautiful arches and vaults, and it is there that I found these pieces of news about the Dal Bianco family, and there I also ate these canestrelli, these sweet cakes that are outstanding. Anyway, Via Venti is the one that we just covered. Rive di Ogliano is the next one. As to the distribution of Prosecco, 750 million, these are Prosecco CDOs, 24,000 hectares of Prosecco CDOs, 600 million of Prosecco CDO. And as the hectares decrease, we have to look for other denominations such as Asolo, a couple of thousands of hectares, and then we have the Conigliano with 8,000 hectares and 100 million bottles, and then we get to our Rive di Ogliano, 207 hectares, a couple of million of bottles. And for your information, of the 107 hectares, we also have Cartizze there, 1.2 million bottles. The Rive di Ogliano, riva in Italian means hillside, steep hillsides that can be found in the central part of the region. They are different from a geomorphological perspective. We have the Alps that over the thousands of years, so the glaciers melting, pushing debris down to the valley, creating a sort of amphitheater. The so-called Rive di Ogliano were created because these debris created hills, and these hills we traveled across with Federico's Subaru make of car, and then I understood what the Balbi is and the Prosecco. The Balbi, if you taste before the harvest, it is more fragrances than the other biotype, which is longer. And one of these wines is the Ponent Hill Vineyard, and the other one is the Eastern Vineyard. Here we have a game to play because we are talking about 2.5 hectares. The grapes show different features according to the side of the hill they are exposed to. And now I'd like to dwell on the awards you won. I remember that you got 97 cents on the decanter, but there is another award that was very important. I don't want to be self-referential, but what I'd like to say here is that the Rive di Ogliano were born out of the 2009 revolution. what did Conegliano Valdobbiadene decided to do, being aware that millions of bottles of the Prosecco CDO would have been produced? What it tried was to extrapolate this concept, hence the name of the Rive di Ogliano, the name, this concept of taking the best lots of the best areas and put them on steroids, so a lower yield, greater focus and attention paid to the wine produced from 180 to 130,000 tons. What it tried to do was to carry out a study on the zoning, hence the famous book on zoning, and also on the terroir, because this area has different terroirs. These 40 rivers, so these 40 sides of the hills, define the differences between Conegliano Valdobbiadene, the southern region, the northern region, and it is a tasting experience which is totally different from the one before. Before it was just Conegliano Valdobbiadene. Instead, within Conegliano Valdobbiadene, I have micro zones which are completely different. Also because Conegliano Valdobbiadene, which is the historical region of this wine, you have different kinds of soil. You have red soil, clay, etc. So here you have two wines in front of you. The scent of these wines is clean, fresh. So the first wine, which is Ardio Ponente, the flowery note is more intense. We have jasmine, bergamotto, also a little bit of candied ginger, while the Ardio Levante, the eastern side, extra dry, 2022, has candied lemon scent, very different wines, and if you taste it, it is even stronger. This difference is even stronger. So you have this sugar residue. 4 or 5 grams per liter gives acidity, fresh, and the palate remains vibrant and doesn't stick to the mouth. And this is also very consistent with its scent. As to the extra dry, the residue is higher, around 14, and its fruit maturity when smelled is very high, but if you taste it, there was a comment from the room, but we cannot hear. Here, well, simultaneously, this wine has a higher sugar residue, but is this the very first thing you think of? No, I'm thinking of it's more fruity than flowery. There is a part of catechin that develops this structure of the wine. And where does it come from? I've always asked myself, is it possible that there is a difference between the eastern and the western side, but there is another factor that can be immediately seen. The vineyard is 50-year-old. There is a Glera population which is outstanding because with the naked eye you see grapes and clusters that have completely different appearances. 2022 is great. I would have said that the sugar residue would have been decreased. No, how is it? Was it a good vintage? Well, vintage 2022, 4 months of very hot weather. It never rained, and we were lucky enough that we are under glaciers, so we always resorted to the wells, the water we have in our wells, because you are at the feet of the Alps. It takes an hour or so to get to Cortina d'Ampezzo. I do not know whether our friends from London or New York understand what we're talking about. But when we talk about this Riva di Ogliano, this relationship between Venice, the Adriatic Sea with its winds, and the fresh winds coming from the Alps, because the worst part of the Alpine weather is blocked. So what you're struck by is that this is a windy area. It is a special area. Yes, Ogliano. It is defined as a windy village in the zoning book because the Fadalto Canal allows the fresh wind from the Alps to hit the Levante, these eastern side. And there is also an important heat exchange, yes, definitely so. And what I can feel from this wine is not making me think of an extra dry wine. This makes me think of a structure of the fiber of the white fiber of lemons. The lemon has a white part below the peel, the yellow peel. There was a comment from the audience. I'll check the internet. Anyway, you understood this is the white part of the lemon. So this cleanliness of the structure is very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Albedo. Federico did not mention this, but this is the wine that was awarded the top 100 from Wine Spectator in 2021. The vintage was 2019, the award was in 2021. The first Prosecco that was ranked amongst the first 100 of Wine Spectator wines. So please, a big round of hands for Federico, because this is another record nobody is aware of. Comments should be into a microphone because it is not easy to hear. Apologies. Well, this question is perfectly aligned with my way of thinking. Because consumers or operators have a hard time making a distinction. For instance, I worked for Chianti. There is a large selection. There is a top level, and these have to comply with the specific standards. Well, the consortium is definitely working on what it defined the great cruise of denomination. I'm talking about the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Consortium. So it protects both the Cartizze and the Rive d'Ogliano in view of protecting this new category, which was established, we said, in 2009. The consortium is heavily investing both in Italy and abroad to convey this message. I believe that it takes time, but anyway, this process started back in 2009. But as I said, it takes a lot of time because in Italy, and I'm sorry to say this, we cannot communicate well our products. There are very many professionals that do not know the difference between the Prosecco CDO, the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco, and so on and so forth. The last wine is a Levante, but it dates back to 2016. So the same wine that has its roots in this soil. Again, the wind we get from Venice is Bora wind, so a significant kind of wine. And please smell this wine. It is fruity. It is a yellow peach, a little bit of mango, mature and ripe tropical fruit. But if you taste it, you feel kumquat, mandarin. I felt this delicate astringency, and then vanilla. We find a ripe apple, and once again you have this pH, which is 3.1, and they managed to lower the pH thanks to this night excursion of the temperature. So the smell, the scent is more mature. It also depends on the bottles, because we opened a bottle which was produced in 2010 because there was one good and the other one was not good, or saffron scent in 2011. But unless you have other questions concerning the Prosecco area, I have a question as to the sparkling wine. As a winery, do you produce the Longchamp method? We adopted the Italian method, the Martinotti method. If you visit our area of Conegliano Valdobbiadene, we call it the Prosecco method, not even the Italian method, because the Italian method, which is like saying the Martinotti method, because it was invented by Mr. Martinotti, was modified by the enological school of the Consortium of Conegliano Valdobbiano. And based on the decisions of those who modified this method, this implied a lower pose laying with the yeasts. So this method is such that in the cuvée we don't have here, because here we decided to bring the selections of the three main denominations. We work in the Prosecco CDO of Treviso and Conegliano Valdobbiadene cuvée. So cuvée means I take grapes from different regions, and my father creates the cuvée from different parts of the region. And that's a bestseller worldwide. Instead, these are very few bottles with specific terroirs. And in the cuvée, the second fermentation takes from 2 to 3 months. For the river, the brut version, 4 months. For the extra drive, it's even 6 months. So completely different approach. Speaking about territory, we should be tasting still wines that the Dal Bianco family has been producing for years now. They were first created in 1993. What seemed interesting to me was to speak about the story of these territory denominations with respect to the protagonists of this territory. Here we have a white wine which is called Rizzardo. The vintage is 2018, a blend of Chardonnay and Manzoni. So you have 40% Chardonnay and Manzoni blend 30%, and then Sauvignon Blanc, White Pinot, and Riesling. 1 year of aging in barrique, but this was back in '93, and your father was engaged in this approval of the denomination. In 1993, we collaborated with the Institute of Research of Wine Making and the Enological School, and we launched a new project. It was not a trivial project, not at all, because in the Conegliano area, there were not just sparkling wines, but also regular wines, so much so that the Enological School was founded there. This is a 360-degree terroir. It has always been so. This is no longer so because the Prosecco success, in a way, undermined all the vineyards and grapes that were produced there. It is much simpler, some say. I don't think so. But what was lost, in my opinion, is the real identity of the specific Conegliano terroir, a 360-degree terroir for both white and red wines and sparkling wines. So in 1993, as we said, we decided to create a CDO, control the denomination of origin, both white and red, international wines. So we have international grapes such as Chardonnay, white Pinot, Sauvignon, Riesling, and the white wine, 5% each, but with the grapes cultivated in the Conegliano era, Manzoni, white grape, coming from crossbreeding developed by Professor Manzoni. So we wanted to develop an international wine, but using the Conegliano grapes. This was experimental because my father and very few other companies, because they were carrying out experiments, so we could not understand whether this would have been a success story or not. So we were carrying out experiments. We planted the vineyard in 1993. The first vintage was 1996 of this white wine. Even the red wine, he planted both of them, and blinded by this wish to produce these international wines, he took the best hills we own and planted the vineyard there in Ogliano. So, same terroir of the Rive d'Ogliano. And I also forgot to mention one thing, because when we spoke about the Riva d'Ogliano, you saw how many different terroirs, orographic terroirs, we have been dealing with. We spoke about moraine debris, but there is also limestone. We also have white limestone, and that gives it a savory taste. This is the best rizzardo I have tasted because it discharged the woody notes. It is fresher, it is very vibrant. 12 months barrique, yes. Every vintage things change. There is still a red thread because the quantities are the same, but given that you crush together all the grapes, every single time it changes. So this is a vineyard wine. It's a wine made from a blend of different grape varieties. Well, the result is great because we have this interesting trace between chamomile flowers and mango, peach and vanilla. But it is the fibery part of this taste which is very interesting, in my opinion. And I believe that in a blindfolded tasting, this wine wouldn't be easy to position because it is fresh, flowery, because of the Manzoni crossbreeding, the Sauvignon Blanc, but also the fresh fruit of the white Pinot, and then a Chardonnay that plays a significant role. What is the shelf price? 35-40 euros. And here we have a red brother, again guaranteed and controlled denomination of origin Conegliano. You have the Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc that account for the 90% of the blend, but smell it. On one side, we have this scent of sandalwood and flowery scent like elegant soap. You have sage, aromatic herbs. This is a wine which is very intense. We feel the prune and also bitter cherries. And here we have a 10% Omarzebino, with the idea of bringing the international indigenous varieties to blend. Here we have the Bordolese cut, and the grape of the Conegliano area is Manzebino. Here it acts like a Bordeaux wine, like a Petit Verdot. It rounds it, it makes it softer. And this is not true for all vintages, but sometimes my father decides to use just a Marzebino with appassimento, dried, but it also depends on the way it gets ripe. Well, it depends if it can be appasito. Well, some part is crushed, but I remember in the year 2000, my father decided that it was going to be dried on the vine. And when we speak about the year 2000, I think of this story. Your father in Hong Kong, again, the beginning of the year 2000, was at an exhibition, and an enologist, very important and renowned enologist, Grange went by. Your father does not remember exactly the name, but he tasted Montesco, this wine, and your father was encouraged to carry out this experiment and extend it. This was the year 2000. My mother and father were at the Vinexpo, International Vinexpo of Hong Kong. These were the first years when my father, in order to get international feedback on the wine he was producing, started shipping these wines to all competitions, whether national or international competitions, and he also carried it around when he went to exhibitions. Talking about the beginning of the year 2000, Montesco was the vintage 98 and 99. I asked my father, he said 98, so he brought this vintage 98 Montesco. While in this exhibition, this distinguished person came by. He tasted all our sparkling wine. Then he saw this red Montesco label and decided to taste it. When he tasted it, my father still remembers this very well. He started asking questions, one after the other, very specific questions. My father immediately understood he was a professional, a wine professional. Very likely he was an enologist, even more than that. That's what my father thought. He wanted to know everything, every single detail. Where was the vineyard? How old was it? What were the clones? What kind of wood was being used for the aging, how was the vinification, every single detail. And my father was very excited. He answered all the questions with great excitement. My father said everything. Sometimes he doesn't say much, but that time he answered all questions. And the very last question was, how does it last? How much does it last? He planted it in 93, first vintage 96. The vintage he had with him was 98, and we were 2002 in Hong Kong. That was the third year, so he did not know how long this wine would have lasted. He was still experimenting the kind of wood, etc. So he answered, I don't know. I couldn't know. But he answered, the enologist answered the question. He said, I'm pretty certain that this wine will last, and it will last for a long time. So this was a great encouragement for your father. He was one of the Penfolds enologists, the most famous winery, one of the most iconic winery. And this is a world benchmark when we talk about wine longevity. So this excited my father so much that he went on with his experiment because he got this feedback from a very important person working for an iconic company for wine longevity, and he experimented even more. So that was the third vintage. 1998. It was like a wild horse. He was experimenting the wine, but analyzing it very carefully. That's what he called it, a wild horse, a wine that is a blend of different grapes that are fermented together is very risky. And tasting the 2010 vintage, because we also brought the 2010 vintage. Well, I did this on purpose. I brought it on purpose because the vintage kept its scent, dark coconut, leathery smell, tobacco leaves. It makes me think of Cabernet Franc. Also blue flowers, but when tasted, it is more tannic. It is more astringent. It tastes less mature than 2017, and with such a blend, it is not easy to manage the phenols. 2017 is very balanced. This 10 other years allowed the wine to be more balanced. But this 2010, the first bottle I opened, I was so dismayed, so disappointed. It is oxidized, what shall I say? But then we changed the bottle, and this is a balsamic note that you can feel, while the other is more balanced. This wine makes us understand that we last long because the smell notes are of cold spice. There is no over ripeness. The wine is again very balanced. This is a red wine, Colle di Conegliano, denomination of origin which is controlled and guaranteed, 11 years in a bottle, 24 months of barrique, harvested 13 years ago, and it comes from Conegliano. Still coming from Conegliano. It is a red coming from Conegliano, and I can well think of this wine opened in another 10 years because its structure is strong enough, and there is no traces of sitting elements. There is no oxidation if you smell it. Have you got questions? Because I'm being told that this is the end of our tasting session. Again, we cannot hear what's being said if outside the microphone. The answer is, I wouldn't say so, because the first vintage was 96. So the decreasing stage of the evolution is starting now, but it's still good. We still have bottles from 1996. I brought the 2010 vintage because it was easier to understand, but if I brought the 1999 vintage bottle, it would have been very similar. 1998, we just have a few for very exclusive tasting. All the people in this room are looking at me like saying, if there is still 1996 vintage, then we could go and taste it. Is there any question from New York and London, and again Milan? Should you have any question, please raise your hand. How do I get the questions from the connected people? What about Milan? It's impossible to hear what's being said. Unfortunately, the sound is very bad. The line is very bad. Your communication was interrupted. The blend. Unfortunately, we are not sure about the question because the line was very bad. There are two questions. The first concerns the availability of these wines on the American market, whether they are already distributed there. Second question, They are asking whether the red wine is a blend or not. As to sparkling wine, they are distributed, imported in the US. The importer is Three Win Imports. So you can get in touch with the importer. As to the wines haven't been imported yet because just the sparkling wine is imported. Because when we speak about the wines from Conegliano, we have the difficulty of making people understand that wine can come from Conegliano, because they all associate the word Conegliano with the sparkling wine, the spumante, but my importers are taking into consideration importing wines. Wines haven't been imported yet, unfortunately. And the red wine is not a blend. This is what we call uvaggio. So wine made from different grape varieties. So a blend, I take different grape cultivars, and then I crush them separately, and then I join, while the so-called uvaggio is to crush all the grape varieties together, and then they are aged together. Is the difference clear? Was the difference clear? Was the answer clear? Okay, thank you. What about Milan? Are there any other questions? Federico, would you like to add something? I'd like to thank you all, starting with the audience sitting here in Milan. I'd like to thank the Milano Wine Week organizers, our friends in London and New York. I also would like to thank you, of course, for moderating this session. And hopefully this tasting of the denominations that my family invested in over the years was appreciated by you, and that you'll remember them. Thank you very much. Thank you, Federico. Thank you to you all for participating. This is a sauna by London, by New York. Thank you very much.